you people?
Hello, agents, and welcome to a special episode of the Ingress Insights podcast hosted by myself, Pokemon Trainer J. Ingress Insights is a podcast where you can get to the latest Ingress news, rumours, general discussions, anything about the Niantic game Ingress. This, as I mentioned, is a special episode, not so much for you, but for me. So this episode has been recorded some time ago and will be posted when I'm, for whatever reason, not able to make an episode that week, so it won't have any news and updates in. It will be going over a different topic. So this week, as hinted by the episode title, it will be going over some of the people that I've discussed before on the podcast, such as Brian, Thia, Pooja, and just a bit more about who they are and what they do, as well as covering a few former Niantic members. So it's important to note on this podcast there won't be any sound effects like they usually are. And it's also because I've recorded on a different program this time and Spotify is making various changes. But anyway, to get into the episode, just want to issue a reminder, these people I'm talking about are all real people. They all have their own private lives. They're entitled to whatever they want to share about the game. So this information that I'm going through has just come from publicly available sources. So, for example, if I say like, oh, Ofa2 loves to do beer grass, but then later Ofa2 comes out and says that they don't drink, then believe what they say, not what I've said on this podcast, because they will know themselves better than I do from bits and pieces I've been able to pick up. And as I said, they're all entitled to their own privacy, their own private lives, to do what they want. So even though their names are out there in the public for some of them, don't pester them, be nice. So with that being said, I'm going to move on to our first person of NianticPooja, better known as NianticPooja. Pooja Srinivas, if I've pronounced that correctly, is the program manager for player experience for Niantic and just had that role for getting on for nearly 9 years now. So she's noted in one of the Women in Ingress threads that I'm going to paraphrase or maybe just read through here, that she started her Niantic journey in 2013, working on something that drew me to Ingress in the first place, being portals. Since then, she's been living her dream job that gives a chance to engage with passionate agents around the world, share their feedback with the product teams, and support events and anomalies that thousands of agents participated in. My fondest memory, she says, as an agent was being part of an op that fielded over Western and Southern India, more than the MU earned, which was 54 million and change. She remembers the excitement of coordinating across locations and time zones and discovering some never before seen locations while trying to find the right anchors. She then ends with, she looks forward to meeting you all out there someday at a live event, anomaly or mission day. Next up we have NianticHilda, who is a community manager for the APAC region. So similarly, she got a small post on the Women of Ingress thread that I'm going to go through on here. So it's from Hilda Leung. So she noted that she started playing Ingress in January 2013 and then joined Niantic in 2017. As a community manager in APAC, I run live events in the region and the bridge between Ingress agents and internal teams. If you participate in any of the 70 plus Ingress mission days and 10 plus XM anomalies I helped organising, I hope you enjoyed them. Getting to meet Ingress agents and listen to their Ingress stories are some of the greatest pleasures in my role. Some of you shared how via Ingress you learned more about the world, saw new possibilities in yourselves, went on amazing adventures, and even met your significant other. You are the reason that I'm proud of being part of the Ingress team. Look forward to seeing you all at live XM anomalies, live mission days, and live meetups soon. When we do meet, let's beer grass. So as I said, that's NianticHilda, who's I've seen noted as attending a few events and going through on there. She's one of the more well-known Niantic named staff, I think, outside of the main ones of Brian and co. And then next I'm going to move on and talk about the current Ingress community specialist, NianticThia or Tia. I'm never quite sure how to pronounce that. I've mentioned NianticThia on the podcast a few times, so I think this is an important one to cover. So NianticThia or Tia, as mentioned, is the newest member of the Ingress team as of 2021. I don't know whether there's been more people hired since then. So she was hired as the Ingress Community Specialist following the retirement of the previous Ingress Community Manager, and she introduced herself on a thread on the Ingress Community Forums, which I'm going to go through on here. So she said, "Hi everyone, I'm at NianticThia, she, her, they, there. I'm excited to be your community specialist. The thing I love most about Ingress is that there are so many ways to enjoy the game. Getting out and exploring the world and looking at it in a way I wasn't before is a close second. I've been in the game industry for over 15 years. Before joining Niantic, I spent 8 years supporting game developer communities around the world. Previous roles have involved community management, production, operations and events. I've also spent a lot of time encouraging women to get into tech and game space by volunteering with global initiatives like Girl Geek Dinners and Global Game Jam, as well as organising regional tech and game events in the US and Northeast, and speaking in the US and Europe about the importance and benefits of both having community and mentorship separately. I believe that everyone can and should be able to enjoy games as a medium if they want to, and in order to do that we need to have everyone involved in the process of making them. I'm a mum to a human and 2 canines, play Ingress way more than I should, and have been World of Warcraft free since Battle of Azeroth. I love to travel and experience new places and new perspectives, and wish I had the photography skills to document it better than I do." So for Thea, she has a Telegram channel I'll try and put into the show notes as well, where she shares updates and details on there, and she's often a contact for anomalies, so people can arrange there and get things that they need to at the anomaly, so things like TS Morpheus being done and any changes or any urgent things. I know that people reached out to contact her before, and she's got quite a quirky sense of humour that she's mentioned a few times, so it seems to annoy some agents and others aren't bothered. She's not been present on the forums too much, though she was present quite a lot initially. I think that's due to having to wear different hats and do extra roles as the Ingress team has reduced in staff members. I think as time recording they're down to 12 members of staff, which is quite a considerable drop from how many there used to be as far as I understand. But I think that's our last current community specialist or community manager that I've got, so I'm going to move on now and talk about someone that's rejoined the team as well. So Masa Kawashima was originally involved in the Ingress team, as far as I understand. They're currently the Niantic Vice President as well, but they've now been appointed as the Ingress Product Lead as of July 23rd, 2023. And when they rejoined the team, they shared a message, and people were excited that the lore would be reactivated and get more of a story, because that had been a bit dry previously. So Masa shared a note, say back in, as I said, July 2023, to say, "Starting this month, I'm one of the product managers at Ingress. It's already been 10 years since I worked on Ingress as a designer in 2013. During that time, I've worked on various projects, but after 10 years travelling with Niantic, I feel the strangeness of being involved in Ingress again. This time I worked on the early story and game design. Someone will join us again. Together with him, our continuing director Brian Rose, and our new team, we will take on new challenges. The reason I've been able to do this for so long is because I have all these supportive agents, and because Ingress hides something special that attracts people, and one of those people who was fascinated by that. At a time when we have overcome the pandemic and are starting to re-enter the world, the brilliance of Ingress XM may allow people to find an unexpected new world." And he mentioned that Brian himself would be attending the Kobe Anomaly on September the 16th from the United States in 2023, and I look forward to seeing all of you who've started and supported us. Please continue to help make Ingress a forever game, and I look forward to working with you. The mention of the forever game there was important at the time. It's still important because there were a round of layoffs at Niantic where they didn't mention Ingress at all in the email or the message that was shared. It was later shared that they do intend to keep Ingress going, but the initial message that was shared only mentioned having Pokemon Go as a forever game, so agents were a bit concerned at what the future of Ingress was. But obviously it's been a little while now since that. Ingress still seems to be going pretty strong, so people are quite happy with that. And then in Masa's message he mentioned Brian, and that's who I'm going to talk about next. So Brian Rose is the game director of Ingress, and he's a lot more public facing, I guess, than most of the other people on the game. He was originally served as a community manager and had a variety of roles at Google before being split up into the Ingress team. And you'll see his Nintendo Me character face on the Ingress forums, and he's usually around at Anomalous confirming the end results. As mentioned, he is the game director of Ingress, so I don't think he gets much higher than that for decision in Ingress. So if there's things that need to change, such as the daily task system, it's probably going to have to go by Brian first of all before that can change. But he's quite he communicates quite a lot on Twitter /X, and he's in the forums every now and again checking the bug reports and things like that. And the best way to really see him and speak to him is at Anomalous and live events, because people have managed to corner him for interviews, things like that. But as I said, he's one of the more well-known Ingress people, quite active in what he shares. And then I'll move into probably this another very well-known Niantic person, but they're not very public-facing, I think, on this one. So the next person I want to discuss is John Hanke, also known as Ace in Ingress. So John Hanke is the Niantic CEO. So I mentioned that it probably couldn't get higher than Brian when it came to Ingress. It can't get higher than John Hanke when it comes to Niantic overall. So if there's changes that would affect Niantic overall, then he would be the one deciding those. So probably most recently people have seen his note about the layoffs and closing the NBA All World and cancelling Marvel and having to do various layoffs in other teams, and mentioning, as I said before, about making Pokemon Go a forever game. So there was a recent BBC interview with him where they were talking mainly about Pokemon Go, but there was a small mention of Ingress that was covered in there, which I think I've discussed previously on the podcast. If not, I will link to it in the show notes on this one. But as I said, if it doesn't get higher than John Hanke, as far as I know, at Niantic, he's the one making all the decisions. So if there are things that annoy you about the game, it's probably Hanke that's decided those. But next I'll move on and talk about a few people who aren't necessarily in the Ingress team or involved in decisions there, but may still have an impact. I know I've mentioned a couple of them on previous podcasts, so they may come up again as well. So good to have some knowledge of exactly who they are. The first non-Ingress but still Niantic person I want to mention is Asim, or Asim. So he's mainly involved in Peridot, which is Niantic's other wholly owned IP. And in that game, if you've not played it, they use a lot of generative AI, and it's heavily AR focused. You can't play it without using AR. So obviously those are things that Niantic are looking to develop further. We've had mentions about AR glasses and headsets, things like that. And every company in the world is trying to figure out the best way of using AI without annoying their users at the same time. So I think things that we see in Peridot and things that we see from Asim will also leak their way into Ingress. So it's important to keep an eye on that and kind of see what Niantic are up to if you want to see what may be coming up in future. And then I'm going to move on and talk about a couple of Wayfarer people now as well. One person you've heard me mention a few times when I've had to say about Ingress related news or Ingress adjacent news, as I usually say, is NianticTintino. So he's the main voice on the Wayfarer forums, acting as a community manager for Wayfarer. So I've mentioned before that I'm a Wayfarer ambassador, so I speak to NianticTintino a fair bit about Wayfarer community concerns. Sometimes they are Ingress related Wayfarer community concerns where it's possible to talk about those. And he has featured in a Niantic video before for year 9, and you'll see him posting on the Niantic Wayfarer forums all the time, sharing updates and news. He doesn't really pop up on the Ingress forums apart from one thread where him and NianticThia went on an Ingress adventure. I don't think he's leveled up his account much since then on Ingress, but at least he's tried the game. And then as well there is NianticAaron, who you'll see again on the Wayfarer forums a fair bit as additional person sharing updates and commenting on things like invalid wayspot reports and investigating any wayfarer abuse and things like that that's raised on the forums. And similarly, you'll also see NianticThib or NianThib on the forums. He does also go in a few non-official wayfarer spaces, such as the Niantic Wayfarer subreddit, and comments on there, just try and help people out. But those are the main 3 wayfarer people that you'll see. So I just want to mention, before I move on to some ex-Niantic people, one Pokemon Go person, which I try not to mention Pokemon Go too much on the podcast, but this one's important for general community, so I will mention this person. The main community manager for Pokemon Go is a person called Kestrel Riot, so they often share updates on social media or just general gameplay that they're doing of Pokemon Go. As mentioned, there was a note from John Hanke during the layoffs that they wanted Pokemon Go to be a forever game. So again, like with Peridot, it's kind of important to know what's going on with Pokemon Go, even if you don't play it, because it can have knock-on effects for what happens in Ingress. Obviously, we now have a daily task system, which Pokemon Go had, first of all, if you're counting Niantic games. As I mentioned at the time, millions and millions of other games have that. It's a great way of driving user engagement and daily active users up. It definitely works in things that I've seen behind the scenes for other games, so it's worth keeping on. But as I said, I know people don't want me to mention Pokemon Go too much, but it's worth knowing who Kestrel is and seeing what they do in that space. So it's worth following them on social media and seeing what they do, what the Pokemon Go team are up to. And then I've mentioned a few times on this so far that there were layoffs, so I am going to go through a few people that I've mentioned in the past or may mention in the future who were important people in the Niantic or Ingress space, and obviously they're having no effect now on it since they've been laid off, but I've mentioned a few of them before, so it's important to mention who they are, what they did, and how that might be important in the future. For all the former Niantic staff, I'm going to start first of all with a person called Ofa2 on the Ingress community forums. I don't know their real name at all, but they were a senior software engineer in the Ingress team. They often communicated on the forum, sharing updates for what the team were looking to do, providing a bit of a peek behind the curtain, and at times they were more active than the community specialist on the forums. Ofa kind of filled that role in between the former community manager leaving the company and a new community specialist being found to really engage with the community. So I'd hope they're in a kind of role where they can do that and also use their software engineer experience. And then next up we have CatanDominik. As implied by the name, they were the community manager for Catan World Explorers, which obviously sunset and didn't really get off the ground in most countries. And they did do some work with the Pokemon Go team after the Catan game closed down, but unfortunately CatanDominik was let go in June 2023. I've made mention of there being a community manager before NianticThia for Ingress. So this person was Andrew Krug, who was usually just called Krug on the Ingress forums. He ran a lot of Ingress AMAs where he answered agents' questions, and then people were quite sad when he moved on and there was no community manager for quite some time. I guess technically there still isn't because the role is different. It's community specialist instead of community manager. I don't know whether the roles differ at all. But as I said, Krug was around communicating with the community, showing up to live events and things like that. He's since moved on from Niantic and got another role. I can't remember even what he does now, but he's no longer involved in Niantic or Ingress. I don't think he even plays the game now, which is totally fair because it's kind of a different period of your life to do. And then also a well-known ex-Niantic person on the Wayfarer side is a NianticDanbocat. So she was the product owner / product manager for Wayfarer, and she was active on the Wayfarer forums. She was also on an episode of the Way Spotters podcast who cover Wayfarer news, and she kind of gave a bit of a look behind the scenes into Wayfarer, but unfortunately she was let go from Niantic in kind of June, July 2022. And then one final one to finish up is HPWULola. So as you can guess from the title, they were involved in Harry Potter Wizards Unite, acting as the main person on their forums as a community manager. And she was around on that game until the game sunset, and she later transitioned over to be the Peridot community manager. Was unfortunately let go at some point a few months before its global launch, and then we had, as mentioned in previous ones, Asim who took over that role. I don't know what Lola is up to now, but she was quite active on the Harry Potter Wizards Unite forums and answered queries on there. And I think that's about it. I don't think I've missed any other important / well-known Niantic staff or ex-Niantic people. I will give a couple of honourable mentions to other forum staff like HPWUBlue, NianticOren and NianticLC, who are or were in Blue's case around in their relevant spaces, but I didn't have enough detail on who they were to be able to add a little section for them, but doesn't mean they're any less important than all the other people that I've mentioned on this podcast. But hopefully this answers a few things on who people are when I've mentioned them on the podcast. If I say NianticThia now, you'll be able to go, oh yes, she's the Ingress community specialist. Or if I mention NianticDanbocat, you can go, oh yeah, she was the previous Wayfarer product owner, and said various things on there. So as I said, the main thing was to kind of give a bit more useful information and clarify who exactly I'm speaking about when I go through these. So that being said, I'll now get things all wrapped up on this special episode. Thanks, agents, for listening to this special episode of the Ingress Insights podcast. As seen by the title, this is part 1. What I'll be planning for a part 2 like this is a bit of the lore people, so explaining who Clue is, Ada, Pack, people like that, and going through that to cover those specific people. And then obviously if we get new people in the team, it might be nice to who they are section on those. If we've got, I don't know, a new member of the Ingress team covering who they are, what they do, or a new person of the Wayfarer team, who they are, what they do. But for now, this is just, as I said, kind of a one-off. For whatever reason, I'm not able to record a podcast with all the latest news in this week. So this is what you get for now. So we'll be back next week with a regularly scheduled episode. But hope you get out there, do your daily hack, and clear all your daily tasks, agents. See you next time.